This event is a celebration of the launch of a new book, Antisemitism on Social Media. The book is edited by Professor Sabine von Mering from Brandeis University and Ph.D. candidate Monika Hübscher from Haifa University. Sophie Schmalenberger, Ph.D. candidate at Aarhus University, and Navras Aafreedi, assistant professor at Presidency University, Kolkata, talk about their contributions.
Now I will hand the floor to Sabine von Mering to introduce the project.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. And welcome, everyone. It's nice to see so many people. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm going to give a brief overview of over the volume that we put together, and then Monika is going to present the chapter she and I wrote together. And after that, Sophie and Navras will speak about their chapters in more detail. And given the differences between the chapters, we suggested that we'll give a few minutes after each to talk about the chapters, and then have time in the end for the discussion of the whole project. So first of all, the book is really a product of the network of Centers for German and European Studies, which are supported in part by the DAAD, the German Academic Exchange Service, and there are 20 such centers around the globe. I'm the director of the Center for German and European Studies at Brandeis University, where I have been a professor also for the last almost 25 years. And these centers are meant to network with each other. And it was at the center at the University of Haifa in Israel where Monika and I first met in the summer of 2018, I believe. Monika is a PhD candidate there and was then, and I was there to give a talk actually about climate change and Germany's right-wing party Alternative für Deutschland, Alternative for Germany. And after my talk, we started chatting and we found a lot of common ground, because there are, of course, a lot of parallels between misinformation and bias spread on social media about the climate crisis and other forms of misinformation and bias or hate. And the parallels are often in the origins of such misinformation, which after all feed on right-wing racist anti-Semitic ideology. So Monika was surprised when she began her PhD project to discover that there was astonishingly little serious academic scholarship into the topic of anti-Semitism on social media. There were a few individual studies and reports by NGOs, and some anti-Semitism scholars had written about the proliferation of anti-Semitism on the internet or online more broadly, but there was no book devoted specifically to anti-Semitism on social media. So when we approached people with the idea for the volume, the word that we kept hearing back, not surprisingly, was it's timely, which of course also has to do with the disturbing fact that the rate of anti-Semitic incidents has been consistently high, at least since the beginning of this century. And this includes violent incidents as the attack on the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018 and the attack on the synagogue in Halle in 2019, to name only those two. At the same time, we've seen a growing sense of concern about the role of social media in spread of hate in general and anti-Semitic hate in particular. And I don't need to tell this group that such developments pose a threat not only to Jewish victims of anti-Semitic hate, but ultimately threaten the very foundation of democratic societies, as I think we all agree with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who famously said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." So the question we asked was, if this is such a serious problem, then why is there not more scholarly research into this phenomenon? What about anti-Semitism on social media seems to be holding people back from studying this? How do we actually study anti-Semitism on social media? And we were able, over a few months, to recruit a very nice mix of contributors for our volume, some who are already well known in the field and some who are just beginning at the beginning of their careers. It was important to us to recruit female authors, as many as we could, as one of the problems we found is that anti-Semitism studies, just like computer science, seems to be one of those last male domains. And we all know, of course, that sexism is another ism that flourishes on social media. It was also important to us to cover a broad spectrum of research, not only in terms of the scholars' backgrounds and various research angles in terms of disciplines and expertise, national linguistic focus. Obviously, this is a global phenomenon with specific national characteristics, Germany with its history being a good example why. So let me give you a quick rundown of the 10 chapters that will not be presented by my colleagues here today so that you get an idea of the whole project. So in addition to the 3 chapters that you will hear more about, we have one chapter that was written by sociologist Armin Langer that looks at the use of familiar anti-Semitic tropes by QAnon, the international meta-conspiracy, as he calls it, that started out on the message board 4chan, but quickly began to be tolerated by Facebook and YouTube, ending up spreading to various countries during the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, QAnon is one of those examples of a conspiracy that's born digitally, but if you like, born on social media, but ends up having real life consequences. We have a chapter by Jakob Guhl from the Institute for Strategic Dialogue that looks at anti-Semitism in Facebook pages supportive of the UK Labour Party, highlighting anti-Semitism on the political left. And we also have a chapter by a senior analyst, Cassie Miller from the Southern Poverty Law Center, about extreme right international neo-Nazi networks recruiting on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media, even after being deplatformed and having regrouped in darker corners of the net. Monika herself contributed a chapter together with Vanessa Walter, who's here, about a troll attack they witnessed during a conference held on YouTube. So in that case, we wanted to show how such an attack can be studied using new methods and tools. Hendrik Gunz and Isa Schaller from the Zentrum für Antisemitismusforschung in Berlin contributed a chapter that looks at Attila Hildmann's journey to open Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism on YouTube and Telegram, and also the role of recommendation algorithms in that context. A very different chapter comes from Hendrik Zoltan Andermann and Boris Zizek from the University of Hanover, who used the method of objective hermeneutics to reconstruct the notorious anti-Semitic meme of the happy merchant in conjunction with COVID-19. Gabi Weimann and Natalie Masri from the University of Haifa present an introduction to anti-Semitism on TikTok with particular emphasis on the youth of its users and how it affects them. Social scientist Quint Chimek provides a glimpse into how Jewish social media users cope with anti-Semitism on social media and how it impacts them. And that's sort of a very, again, a very different chapter that uses qualitative interviews. And we also have a chapter by Günther Jekeli and his team at Indiana University that explains how they are working on creating an AI definition of anti-Semitism and the difficulties involved in coming to such a definition that artificial intelligence can work with. And then Ifat Barakcheni and Leon Saltil from the World Jewish Congress contributed a chapter on the role of civil society in pressuring social media companies and governments to do more to rein in anti-Semitism on social media. And finally, Michael Bossetta, a political and data scientist at Lund University in Sweden, takes a bird's eye view to explain why, even though anti-Semitism is, of course, a tiny portion of hate spread on social media, its impact must be taken much more seriously. Of course, there were also chapters we had hoped to include in this volume that did not materialize. For example, one about teaching anti-Semitism on social media vigilance in schools. And we also did not find a scholar who has worked on anti-Semitism on social media in the Middle East and maybe other regions that we know are of interest in this regard. So in fact, we often heard from anti-Semitism scholars whom we approached that they simply did not feel qualified to write about social media. And Monika will explain in more detail why there are many reasons why this isn't easy, why it isn't easy to work on social media, and having that has to do, with data access, privacy laws, the platform's resistance, and so on. A topic that was also brought up again by Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman-Schultz in the International Task Force to Combat Online Anti-Semitism hearing last month. Social media may not be what initially attracts students to the study of anti-Semitism when they start out, although I have a suspicion that this is changing, that is going to change fast, and that younger people now who are digital natives will be hopefully also coming into anti-Semitism studies with more of an understanding of the necessity of this. Clearly, in order to study this phenomenon effectively, we need to equip and train young scholars with new methods and new tools. It's also clear that we need much more broad interdisciplinary cooperation beyond the humanistic disciplines of history or philosophy. We need cooperation with experts on hate speech. And most importantly, we need cooperation with those who understand algorithms in general and social media algorithms in particular, that is, people in media studies, computer science, social media communication, design, etc. So Monika will talk more about that. The response to our volume so far has encouraged us. We already presented it in a number of online webinars and meetings, highlighting different chapters, including at Brandeis in April with the World Jewish Congress and the UN, the EU, and Facebook Meta in May, at the Wiener Holocaust Library in July, and Monika will present it at IRA in Göteborg next month. And Navras actually has been nominated for a prize for his chapter. And Monika and I will also do an in-person presentation of the volume on November 23rd at the Zentrum for Antisemitism Research in Berlin, among several others. So clearly interest is high, and the fact that you're all here today is encouraging as well. As we say in the introduction to the volume, we see this book as a starting point, which we hope will inspire many others to study the issue of anti-Semitism on social media. And with this, I hand it over to Monika to delve into our first chapter.
Hello, everybody. You can hear me, right? Okay, great. So I'm Monika. I am with Sabine, the co-editor of this book. And I'm a PhD candidate at Right-Wing University in Israel, where I research on anti-Semitic expressions in Facebook posts of the German radical party, the Aafreedi, which is now also in the parliament. But I'm also a research assistant at the University Duisburg-Essen, where I am Sorry, I just got confused because things are popping up on the screen. So I'm a research assistant at the University Duisburg-Essen in Germany, where I am right now. And there I'm working in an interview project. We interviewed young people about their positioning, their experiences with Holocaust education, with Holocaust commemoration, with anti-Semitism, and other forms of hate, to find out how they're actually positioning themselves towards anti-Semitism. And the first thing we found out was that social media is the #1 space where young people are confronted with anti-Semitism. So this is what I'm working on. I give a lot of workshops and lectures on anti-Semitism in Germany, but also abroad. I give lectures also on educational material in Germany, which we also found out is a huge issue in transporting anti-Semitic knowledge, as we call it. So this is my general work, and when I'm bored, I'm editing books, and then they get published. And as everybody knows who works in academia, this is how it goes, and you just never sleep. But anyway, I hope that my short talk, it's really a short talk, will interest you, and it's going to be a little bit interactive towards the end. So I sent you the link beforehand of our book, and as you can see, our first chapter is called A Snapshot of Anti-Semitism in 2021, and I'm going to give you just a little extract so that you really would want to read it. And I will start now. So the question we're dealing with today is, what drives this unprecedented dissemination of anti-Semitism? The emergence of social media and its widespread use has led to a surge of anti-Semitism. Because of its global presence and countless variations that in its vastness are impossible to capture and contain, anti-Semitism on social media is distinctive from offline anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism on social media are posts, reels, vlogs, memes, GIFs, and emoji combinations that include hateful anti-Jewish speech and images on algorithmically curated platforms. An algorithm is a mathematical set of rules that specifies how a group of data behaves online. So algorithmic curated platforms are, for example, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Anti-Semitism on social media is violence through verbal and visual discrimination and aggression. Anti-Jewish violence on social media has cultural weight and must be understood as part of a tradition of hatred that has led to genocide. Expressions of anti-Semitism on social media reinforce historical violence and can imply an acute threat. The rise of anti-Semitic incidents on social media has accompanied a surge in hate crimes in real life. So there is reason to believe that anti-Semitic hate speech on social media migrates into the real world. Currently, Jewish people face verbal and physical attacks on and offline daily. Synagogues and Jewish institutions are attacked, and anti-Semitic conspiracy myths have become normalized and erode solidarity in our society. Anti-Semitism on social media is a global phenomenon in many regards. It appears in many languages, it has no geographical borders, and seems to affect society as a whole. Therefore, it is no surprise that virtually all reports on the topic show a rise in anti-Semitic incidents and attest to social media's exceptionally alarming role in the incitement of anti-Semitic violence. Social media has revolutionized the generation and dissemination of anti-Semitism. The main drivers that proliferate anti-Semitic hate nowadays might be algorithms. Algorithms curate social media content. That means social media users have only limited power to influence what they see on their feed or stream. Because social media is dependent on user-generated content, algorithms favor posts, tweets, or videos with lots of user engagement and disseminate it further. Lots of user engagement is created through liking, disliking, sharing, and commenting, and it is exactly these tools that work like incentives to generate more material. Social media algorithms are adaptive to users' preferences. For example, if users are interested in content and exchange about the Second World War and the Holocaust, they will be recommended to connect with other users who favor that content and will be exposed to more posts about these topics. What users see on their social media profile is shaped by what they and other people posted, shared, and liked. Problematic is that algorithms are currently not sophisticated enough to distinguish between content that informs about the Holocaust versus content that relativizes it or denies it. And so they might disseminate anti-Semitic content further, the algorithms, instead of taking it off the platform. Recommendation algorithms are also known to gradually expose social media users to more extreme content, as exemplified by Luke Munn's study of YouTube. Matthew Williams explains in his book, The Science of Hate, which I recommend you to check out, that because algorithms learn from user behavior, they do not only reflect users' prejudice, but embed the biased knowledge into their code. This means that algorithmic anti-Semitism is first generated by what users post, then shapes what users are exposed to, which as a result normalizes anti-Semitism. Algorithms seem to play an essential role in the mainstreaming of hateful statements, such as Holocaust denial or anti-Semitic hate. Facebook is another example. The algorithm-driven newsfeed of the platform privileges provocative and hateful content, setting up a stimulus response loop where hateful speech and visuals potentially become normalized too. Users who post anti-Semitic content and get likes and shares feel validated in their hateful positioning. But even users who stumble across anti-Semitic posts and see that they received a lot of engagement might be convinced to accept them as true. Sean Parker, Facebook's former president and now one of the platform's most outspoken critics, explained that comments and likes function as social validation feedback loop, leading to dopamine hits. Social media, so he says, was designed to create revenue by exploiting vulnerability in human psychology, namely the wish for validation. Anti-Semitic expression on social media adapt to the platform's ever-changing restrictions. Therefore, users increasingly use code words, emoji combinations, and deliberate typos to avoid detection by moderation AI, artificial intelligence, that is, algorithms that are supposed to detect materials that break the rules of the platform. Let me show you an example. And I'm going to put the example into the chat. Can everybody see it? You don't see it in the chat, what I posted? Can you give me a sign? Thank you.
No, it's there. It's kind of small, but it's there.
It's an emoji combination.
Yeah. Yeah.
Recently, the anti-Semitic emoji combination of a Star of David and the red, resembling the Nazi propaganda of linking Jews to vermin, has seen an uptick. To avoid detection, users would switch letters and post on social media "Jill or Q's" instead of "kill all Jews." This phenomenon of sidestepping platform rules on hate speech restriction is called algospeak, which will pose an ongoing issue in reducing hate. Artificial intelligence has long been hailed to be on the forefront of combating hate on social media, but the process of teaching algorithms to detect anti-Semitism is time-consuming and giving the adoption of hateful expressions to social media environment never-ending. Nevertheless, current research projects experimenting with AI show valuable insights into the possibilities and restrictions of its employment. One way to understand how AI could potentially be used to determine anti-Semitic expressions is with the help of the Perspective API. We will look at Perspective API in a second, and we'll try it out with some examples that I found on social media. The Perspective API uses machine learning to identify toxic expressions online and is available for everyone to use and to check the content before posting it on social media. Helena Mihaljevic and Elisabeth Steffin, two researchers from Berlin, used Perspective API for their research on the toxicity of anti-Semitism on German Twitter and Telegram, and find that it identifies explicit anti-Semitic expressions as toxic. However, the API fails to recognize implicit forms of anti-Semitism, which might be much more prevalent on social media. And Sophie will actually show us some examples of that. Now, I finished my presentation, but I would like to show you some examples of the Perspective API. Let me just share my screen. Do you see the Perspective API? Okay, so I'm typing in pretty nasty stuff now, please be aware. You see 96, it's very small, but can you see it? 96.18% that this is toxic. Let's try it the other way around, as we find very often now on social media. Nothing. Nothing. It doesn't find anything. You see that, right? Okay. Now, you probably heard that Kanye West posted anti-Semitic tweets on social media. He has 3 million followers, 30 million followers, and they all could see it. And let's try and see how this is perceived. (72.58%). Okay, this is a death threat against Jews. I would have liked to see a 100 there. And I would like to stop with the infamous sentence from Charlottesville: "Jews will not replace us," is not toxic. So you see the issue with algorithmic detection of anti-Semitism. And this was my presentation. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very, very much. So we're going to open the floor for 5 minutes for some discussion and some questions. Leah, do I need to help you unmute?
No, sorry, that was just virtual applause. I don't have a question.
Oh.
If this is all too sudden now, we can also discuss in the end, if you would prefer to have some more time.
I guess, Monika, the obvious question to ask is that maybe the media isn't the message. Maybe the message is the message, and there have been anti-Semitic movements and racist movements in the past before social media existed, and people talked about radio propaganda and TV, and I'm sure people were unsettled by books and printing when that was first around. So the media is the message, or the message is the message?
Well, I think that the question is too simple for such a complex issue, because what we're dealing with now, and we have, unfortunately, we have a comparison, right? We have a Nazi propaganda pretty well documented, so we can really draw from a lot of data. And we see how Nazi propaganda spread. We can see how far that spread, right, in and during the Nazi state. And now you can find anti-Semitic propaganda. I don't think there's a part of the world, of the global world on social media where you don't find anti-Semitic memes. The most infamous one is probably the Happy Merchant, the so-called Happy Merchant meme, which you probably have heard of. And you find it, it adapts to every language, to every context, for whatever people think of. We have meme generators. For instance, there's a meme generator called The Jewish Girl. So you can just generate an anti-Semitic meme in a second, and it can spread through the whole world in a second, right? So we are dealing with radicalization machines on really an unprecedented scale. This has never been there before.
Sorry, just to follow up, your argument is that there's something particular about radicalization that is enabled by social media, which, for example, anti-radicalization is not enabled in a similar way. Can you just kind of explain that?
You mean anti-radicalization is not done on social media?
Well, no, I mean, well, look, my experience of social media is using it to critique and to take on anti-Semitism. Yeah. Is your argument that there is something about the way that algorithms work that help the anti-Semitism compared to discourse that is against anti-Semitism?
Well, when you, for instance, you said you use it for critique. When you, for instance, write something under an anti-Semitic post and you critique it, then you basically help disseminating the post further. So this is what algorithm-driven platforms do, right? This is their business, how they make revenue. So this is now, for instance, this is a huge issue in Germany because educators invested a lot of time and heart, actually, I have to say, to teach young people or people in Germany to not be bystanders anymore, right? This is the lesson from the Holocaust. You cannot be a bystander anymore because then you are complicit. And now we're dealing with social media and we have to tell them, you cannot behave like you behave offline. If somebody says something anti-Semitic offline, you have to intervene immediately. You have to stop it. If someone says something anti-Semitic on social media, the worst thing you could do is to write something under this post. What you then should do is to report this post, best to the police. I'm not sure how far the laws in the UK are on this, but I know you have also the Community Trust Service. Is it
CST.
true? Exactly. You can also send anti-Semitic content to them. And to show your solidarity with the people affected or the community affected. I think this is the most important thing, to teach people to show solidarity. So instead of posting something under this anti-Semitic post, write something uplifting, in solidarity with the person or the community or the institution affected. This is,
Thank you. Let me very quickly, I was going to say to go to the 2 questions, but very quickly, let me go to 3 questions. But we have plenty more to get through today. So please, very quick questions and quick answers.
Thank you. Yes.
Starting with Andy.
I will be very quick, I promise. First of all, I wanted to let you know that the chat is disabled for me, so I can't actually put anything in the chat. I don't know if that's the case for anybody.
Sorry.
Okay. My question really, apart from saying thank you so much for that brilliant presentation, has there been any evidence of a willingness on the part of social media companies to actually do anything about developing better AI or putting in more human moderators?
Let me take the 3. Can I take the 3, Carrie?
Sure. Yeah. First, thank you for the book. I've actually read it, and it's really terrific. Just a quick question, because there are obviously things I don't understand. So I'm puzzled that perspective would not identify Jews will not replace us as toxic. I'm assuming that the AI protocols say that have been developed by Gunter Kelly and his team at Indiana would detect that, because they would have taught it, I imagine, by now that that's a phrase that should be identified. So is it because perspective is not updated, or does it work in a different way?
And let me just take the 3rd question, Monika. Siam, how do I say your name?
Siam.
Siam. I've seen you around and I never knew how to say your name.
Oh. Yes, so my question, something I've been thinking about recently is, what it must be like for children, Jewish children who are seeing all of this. And do you think, I'd like to hear your views on, what we should be doing do you think as a community we should be educating them and really kind of putting time and money into helping them prepare for what they're going to see online? Just, yeah.
Monika.
Yes, I'm happily also answering more questions after all of the presentations. So I will start backwards. Siam is your name, right? Yes, so first and foremost, soon a paper is coming out where I'm actually talking about the effect of anti-Semitic hate speech on Jewish social media users and non-Jewish social media users. It has a huge effect. That is all we know by now. This needs to be researched in depth, how social media hate is affecting people, and particularly young people. We know that being affected with hate, if Jewish social media are being affected, they are restricting themselves on social media. They're creating their own Jewish bubble because they feel solidarity only comes from the Jewish community, and they hide their Jewishness. This is what we know, and this is not what we want at all, because we are taking away the right to participate. Like, social media is democratic exercise in some sort, right? So, and if they cannot participate, their voices are being unheard, and then non-existent. We need to teach kids social media literacy, how to deal with hate. It's not only anti-Semitism, it's several forms of hate. And I'm afraid, like, I talked to a physician, and she said she's so shocked about social media. When we were working on the book, she asked us if she can contribute because she has so many kids suffering anxiety, stomach aches, and so on and on from being affected by social media hate. So this is something we clearly need to address more and more. And if you are a researcher, start researching on it. I back you with every data I have.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Thanks. Go on. You introduce the next one, Monika.
So yes. So about Perspective API and Jews will not replace us. And this is, I think, Perspective API is also trained by the ones who use it. So if we, you can also disagree, right? I could have gone now that it doesn't show toxicity. I could have gone now and I could press disagree, and then I could explain why. And if more and more people do that, the AI will learn that, right? The AI learns what we are giving it. So that's why I suppose it just didn't come up enough, or people didn't disagree enough. And then social media, my heart immediately starts beating when I hear that questions about the contribution about social media companies, because we know they have algorithms which detect a lot more hate speech, but they are not taking it off because they generate revenue from everything that is user-generated, every user-generated content. The problem is also that they're not sharing this data with us. It varies between social media companies. They have more or less transparency with researchers, but they are not doing enough. It's ridiculous what they're doing compared to the threat that we are facing. And you all should be really worried about it, upset about it, and demand from your politicians that they will enforce restrictions on social media companies. Thank you very much. We can discuss later. I would now hand over to Sophie.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me. Yep. Yes, great. Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to be here. Just, I mean, a very quick introduction. I'm Sophie Schmalenberger. I'm a PhD candidate at Aarhus University in Denmark, and I'm writing my dissertation about the Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD. And yeah, I mean, I guess if you can say one good thing about the AfD is that it's brought Monika and me together, and sort of, yeah, we bonded over writing the chapter I will introduce to you today. Let me just try to share my screen. Yes, I hope you can see it. Yes, so in the chapter that I've co-written with Monika, we analyzed the social and media activities of the far-right German party Alternative für Deutschland, or short AfD. And what many people might not expect is actually that the AfD is indeed, yeah, so to say, Germany's social media party. They are strategically employing social media, and they're also much more successful on social media if we compare them to other parties, and particularly sort of the older or more established parties, and they're particularly successful on Facebook. And in order to examine the AfD's anti-Semitic messages on social media, Monika and I looked at their posts on occasion of the 8th of May 2020, the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II in Europe, and in Germany that is a day that is usually reserved to commemorate the victims of Nazi Germany. But in the AfD posts, we actually found very little mention of the Holocaust, and instead the AfD stressed German victimhood, both during and after the war. And we found that established concepts like primary anti-Semitism, so explicit expression of hatred against Jews, or secondary anti-Semitism, so the relativization or denial of the Holocaust, could not really capture what we saw was going on in those posts. And that's why we developed the concept or the idea of tertiary anti-Semitism. And yeah, as the term already suggests, we understand tertiary anti-Semitism as an extension of primary and secondary anti-Semitism. It is a highly contextual form of anti-Semitism, and often only emerges from the non-mentioning of Jewish and other Holocaust victims, and the omission and marginalization of their death and suffering. Tertiary anti-Semitism must be considered like what we would call a coded form of anti-Semitism, because often it is not really recognizable or identifiable what is going on at first glance. So, you know, even for Monika and me, it actually needed quite a bit of, you know, effort and a lot of discussions and going back through the material to realize what was actually going on here. But nevertheless, tertiary anti-Semitism contributes to the normalization and vindication of anti-Semitism, because ultimately it paints or it contributes to painting an image of history in general and German history in particular, in which the Holocaust does not matter. And since the core of tertiary anti-Semitism is the omission and marginalization of the Holocaust, we encountered one central challenge, namely that tertiary anti-Semitism is, as I already mentioned, quite hard to detect because it emerges in coded forms. Often it cannot be found in, you know, one particular sentence or one particular word, but it's sort of the underlying narrative or storyline promoted by a given statement. And other times it only emerges from the context in which a certain statement is made, or it is perpetuated and brought about by very implicit comparisons or equations, or is the result of what is not mentioned, what is left out. To capture these implicit and veiled forms of anti-Semitism, these coded forms of anti-Semitism, we came up with the concept of anti-Semitic cues. So rather than looking at, you know, explicit expressions of Holocaust denial, or, for example, explicit expressions of anti-Semitic stereotypes or hatred against Jews, we understand anti-Semitic cues as textual or visual elements that sort of hint, often very implicitly, towards interpretative patterns and narratives that constitute anti-Semitic worldviews, or can foster anti-Semitic worldviews, and that can result sort of in a susceptibility to explicit anti-Semitism. And to give you an example of anti-Semitic cues, I've brought you this example of one Aafreedi politician introducing Germans as primary victims of the Second World War. Here we see Stefan Prochka, member of the Aafreedi, that you can see on the picture here on the right, who is suggesting in this video he posted on Facebook that with the end of the Nazi dictatorship, for many Germans, the suffering only began and culminated in the greatest expulsion of human history. And therefore, he goes on a little bit later in the post, our ancestors, our fathers and mothers, our grandparents.
What's that? No.
Sorry.
Where?
Oh, okay. All right, I'll just continue, I guess. Where was it? So he uses this, or he perpetuates this sort of view on German history by later claiming that the 8th of May should be an occasion to remember our ancestors, our fathers and mothers, our grandparents, who were the victims of the greatest crime against humanity. And just as a reminder, he refers to his ancestors, right? So his German ancestors. And this is only one example of various statements we found that do not explicitly deny the Holocaust or express hatred against Jews, but de-emphasize and leave out the genocide and other crimes against humanity and war crimes committed by Germans. And through this, these statements contribute to an interpretation, or rather distortion of German history, in which the Holocaust is overshadowed by German victimhood. We also found that in order to communicate these coded forms of anti-Semitism, the Aafreedi actually employs different rhetoric strategies, and I really, of course, I encourage you to have a look into the book if you want to get to know them in more detail. But one example we found was what we call tokenism. So references to symbolic figures or public personas in order to make a statement appear more legitimate. And one example here would be the AfD Berlin's Georg Pasterski, who strategically employs the fact that his father was a Polish forced laborer and victim of National Socialism to introduce himself as a descendant of Nazi victims. And by this sort of framing of himself, making his relativization and omission of the Holocaust, which we find later in his statement, he's making that sort of seem more innocent, less extreme, and therefore arguably easier to agree with, because he sort of assumes the position of a descendant of a victim. So what he says sort of cannot be completely wrong due to his family history, would sort of be the underlying idea here. So our analysis and our finding of these highly contextual and implicit forms of anti-Semitism, I would say, underlines the importance of qualitative research when investigating anti-Semitism on social media, because I mean we've already talked a bit about it in the questions you had to Monika, but just to underline this, I think our case very well shows that particularly when it comes to the omission and implicit marginalization and relativization of the Holocaust, it's quite hard to see how artificial intelligence or other automated quantitative analytical tools would have been able to identify a statement as anti-Semitic because of what the statement does not mention or only marginally mentions, right? And overall, we found that for the AfD, social media provide a space where promoting a revisionist and anti-Semitic account of German history is possible, because they can circumvent journalistic gatekeeping and sort of a wider public scrutiny, and they can instead promote an interpretation of German history in which the Holocaust is omitted and marginalized, while Germans appear as primary victims of World War II in its aftermath. And also we did a very, unfortunately, only very brief exploration of user comments, but this exploration also showed us that these anti-Semitic cues were understood by other users and sometimes also led to more explicit forms of anti-Semitism in the respective user comments and interactions. And also, these statements actually lead to is definitely something we need more research on. Yes, I mean, two challenges that sort of occur from our findings are definitely how to prevent or govern these coded forms of anti-Semitism, and how to deal with coded forms of anti-Semitism, which, especially among parents and educators, who also, I mean, need to be, for example, empowered to also recognize these concealed forms of anti-Semitism. But maybe, those two questions is also something we can discuss later, but I just want to include them as maybe starting point for discussion. Yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very, very much, Sophie, really interesting. Let me open it up for short questions or comments, and then we will move on and have more time at the end for comments.
There is a question in the chat, Sophie.
Oh, wait.
How do you distinguish between anti-Semitism and other idiotic ideas that are so prominent online? In other words, you can find all sorts of crazy idiotic stuff on social media that no one of us would take seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point that it has to be taken serious is that it is communicated by, a German party that, according to the latest polls, would be voted for by like 14% of Germans, that is sitting in most of the German parliaments, or that sits in the federal parliament and in most of the regional parliaments. and that is also having I mean, like we cannot really see how many people their posts reach, but we can see that compared to other parties, they by far have the highest numbers of followers and have, you know, big numbers of likes. So, you know, I mean, it should also be taken serious if a private person does this and sort of promotes these, I mean, false ideas of German history, but of course, I mean, it's done not by a private person, but by a political actor who is, I mean, in a very implicit way, doing what right-wing extremist parties have done before in sort of explicitly denying or questioning, or, you know, the idea that Jews profited from the Holocaust or that Jews made up the Holocaust, and all these myths and narratives have been around before. So I think, and this is, in a sense, we understand this as a new way of communicating them, because Monika, did you want to say something?
Yeah, but finish, please, after you finish.
No, no, I just thought you gave me a sign or something. But no, I mean, and I think, I mean, Holocaust denial in Germany, right, is forbidden by law. But I think we also see this sort of tertiary form, this implicit form of yet another way on social media to circumvent the legislation and offer something that is essentially communicating the same, but is not punishable. And that is also, I think, you know, referring to a broader pattern we see on social media, as Monika has shown you before, right? I mean, it's one of those many strategies to keep communicating extremist ideas and getting away with it in a sense.
Yeah, and I wanted to answer Doron's question in a bit more broad way. So you can also find it by case studies, like as the Aafreedi as a case study, or other actors that we know are anti-Semitic right now. For instance, we would probably all look at Kanye West, or events. We know that there is a spike in anti-Semitic expressions that collaborates with or correlates with events and keyword search, right? So you can go on social media. We know kind of from other studies which keywords trigger anti-Semitism, and we also use that to answer it a bit more.
Can I follow up, please? Can I follow up?
But I have no idea who's speaking, but yes.
Doron, I'm the one who asked the question. You know, I find it striking that the partisan anti-Semitic stuff, if I understand you correctly, Sophie, that they get more echo, more sharing than other posts of the German, you know, neo-Nazi party. I mean, is this kind of something that we can quantify?
I mean, we haven't looked at whether the anti-Semitic posts get, compared to the Aafreedi's other posts, if they get an exceptionally high amount of shares and likes and, you know, comments and reactions. But the Aafreedi, I mean, they are. I think we can, you know, without having conducted a study on it, we can, I think, very confidently say that they do, because they have much more followers than other far-right extremist parties or groups have had in Germany, and I mean, also more followers than most of the, you know, the big German parties do have on Facebook, for example.
There's actually research from the Washington University who branded the Aafreedi the first Facebook party ever. So they have done quantitative research on the Aafreedi, and this is why the Aafreedi is also in our focus, because they're so successful on social media. And the researchers branded them the first Facebook party ever. And that is because when Facebook had their first office here in Berlin, they invited all of the German parties, all of them, extreme right-wing German parties, and taught them how to use Facebook.
I would like to move on, and there will be more time for discussion, to Navras Aafreedi, who is from the Presidency University of Kolkata in India, and who is going to speak about online anti-Semitism in Urdu.
Thank you, David. I'll quickly share my screen. I contributed a chapter to the book. The chapter is titled Anti-Semitic Rhetoric in Urdu on YouTube. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of History at Presidency University, Kolkata, where I teach courses in global Jewish history, minority studies, genocide studies, and interfaith relations. Religious anti-Semitic rhetoric abounds in Urdu on YouTube in multiple formats, such as interviews, but also discourses, speeches, and lectures by Islamic televangelists and clerics. Many of these videos attract viewers millions and are widely shared on social media. The significance of the Urdu language lies in the fact that it is the lingua franca of linguistically diverse South Asian Muslims, making up almost a third of the global Muslim population. It has also been the language of South Asian Islamic discourse. It is spoken as a first language by nearly 70 million people and as a second language by more than 100 million people, primarily in Pakistan and India. YouTube has over 265 million monthly active users in India. About 1,200 channels from Indian creators have more than 1 million subscribers. About 73% of Pakistanis watch YouTube every month. YouTube is one of the top 2 most visited websites and the 4th most Googled search term in Pakistan. Against this backdrop, the dissemination of anti-Semitic content by clerics on YouTube among the Muslim community must be taken seriously. When accessing YouTube in India, one finds community guidelines in 41 languages, but the only South Asian language among them is Hindi. The guidelines clearly warn against hate speech without specifically mentioning anti-Semitism. However, a couple of YouTube channels, Majid Goraya with 200,000 subscribers and Learning Center with 14,500 subscribers, have posted a video, each explaining the YouTube community guidelines in Urdu. This shows YouTube's disregard for the large Urdu-speaking community and leaves the responsibility to inform about the guidelines on the platform to the users. Furthermore, YouTube ignores the hate speech problem caused by clerics. Of the 108 YouTube channels whose videos were shortlisted for this study, 11 have the number of followers in millions, which in descending order are detailed in the table before you. The YouTube channel, Dr. Israr Ahmad Official, has now been terminated. I'm not sure, but the publication of the book, Anti-Semitism on Social Media, may have had a role to play in it. However, a new YouTube channel named after Dr. Israr Ahmad has emerged in its place. There are 26 clerics and commentators who figure prominently in the 120 videos analyzed for this study. 15 of them are from Pakistan, 7 from India, and 1 from the United Kingdom. The geographical location of the remaining 3 was impossible to determine. Israr Ahmed has by far the largest number of videos in Urdu with anti-Semitic content posted by several channels. Israr Ahmed tended to accuse Jews of almost everything bad under the sun. However, some of the recurring themes common to the discourses by other Islamist theologians and commentators are: 1. Jewish antagonism towards Islam since its advent. 2. The depiction of racism, jealousy, stubbornness, arrogance, treason, and deceit as traits of Jewish character. 3. The accusation of the falsification of sacred texts. And 4. Jewish global conspiracy. The polemics repeatedly referred to in Israr Ahmed's YouTube videos are the following: 1. Allegation of the distortion / falsification of the scriptures by Jews. 2. Prohibition on friendship with Jews and Christians. 3. Transformation of Jews into apes as divine punishment for violation of Sabbath. 4. Allegation of the murder of prophets by Jews. 5. Condemnation of most Jews for both rejecting the Prophet Muhammad and failing to live up to their own religious imperatives. 6. Prophecy of the annihilation of most of the Jewish people by Jesus at the end of times as God's wrath for their misdeeds. And 7. The prophecy of the killing of Dajjal, that is Antichrist, followed by the annihilation of his Jewish followers, according to certain interpretations of a hadith, Sahih Bukhari. In one of his discourses available on YouTube, Ahmed said, तालमूद की ये तालीम है कि असल में इंसान तो बस हम यहूदी हैं, ये बाकी जितने इंसान हैं गोयम और इनके लिए दूसरा लफ्ज है जेंटाइल्स, ये असल में इंसान नुमा हैवान हैं, और जबकि इंसान का हक है हैवान को इस्तेमाल करना, एक्सप्लॉइट करना, घोड़े को टांगे पे बग्गी पे बांधते हैं कि नहीं, और बैल को आप अपने हल में जोतते हैं, इसी तरह हमारा हक है तमाम इंसानों को का खून चूसना, उन्हें एक्सप्लॉइट करना, उन्हें इस्तेमाल करना, और इसके लिए बेहतरीन तरीका यह है कि उन्हें वाक़ईतन हैवान बना दिया जाए, इंसानी अक़दार उनसे छीन लिए जाएं. Ahmed says that according to the Jewish text Talmud, all Gentiles or Goyim are human-like creatures, but not human, just as human beings are entitled to use other creatures such as horses and oxen. Similarly, the Jews are entitled to use the non-Jews for their benefit. And the best way to do so is to turn them into beasts by striking at the very roots of family values. Ahmed finds the Jews successful in doing so, as according to him, the sense of modesty has vanished in the West. Ahmed tells his audience that Jews believe that sexual pleasure can be arrived at by any way whatsoever. Jews, using the power of the sole supreme power on earth, are laying siege on Muslim society so that their social and ethical order gets ruined the way they destroyed it in the West. The video posted on April 3rd, 2020 had attracted 5,622 views, 252 likes, and 36 comments, all positive, by October 14th, 2022. There were no dislikes. The importance of discourses by Islamic clerics on YouTube becomes clear when we take into account how person-to-person transmission has always been at the heart of the transmission of Islamic knowledge, as pointed out by Francis Robinson. The belief that listening to the author himself was the best way of getting to the truth led Muslim scholars to travel long distances across the Muslim world in order to receive in person the reliable transmission of knowledge. When a scholar could not get knowledge from an author in person, he strove to get it from a scholar whose isnad, a chain of transmission from the original author, was thought to be the most reliable, informs Robinson. It also explains the Muslim skepticism of the written word. Robinson draws our attention to the fact that print would establish itself in the Muslim world only 4 centuries after it had established itself in the West. He points out that the Quran was always transmitted orally. Muhammad conveyed to his followers orally the messages he is believed to have received from God, which within just a few years of his death were written down, but only as an aid to memory and oral transmission. And this has been the function of the written Quran ever since. With the proliferation of Islamic clerics and Islamist orators on YouTube, we are witnessing a kind of revival of the age-old tradition of the oral transmission of Islamic knowledge, but unfortunately also the dissemination of anti-Semitic discourses on a large scale. One reason behind the popularity of YouTube is that it is not only a social networking site, but also a content provider, allowing every user, both identified and anonymous, to not just view, but also upload videos. According to a 2016 representative study, 40% of users aged between 14 and 19 had encountered extremist content via video platforms such as YouTube. A report prepared by the Online Hate Prevention Institute, Melbourne, found YouTube harboring most anti-Semitism, with 41% of all anti-Semitic content available on social media, as per the study's sample of 2,057 categorized items. The report also points out that YouTube was likely to remove on average of only 8% of the anti-Semitic items from its platform that are brought to its attention, while the removal rate for Facebook is 37% and for Twitter, 22%. Of 3 social media studied for this report, Holocaust denial was found to be most prevalent on YouTube. Facebook and Twitter were discovered to be working as vehicles for the circulation of YouTube videos denying the Holocaust. Anti-Semitism was already there in South Asia, but YouTube has been accelerating its spread like a virus. It promotes negative stereotypes of Jews via its anti-Semitic content in Urdu on South Asia and also in the rest of the world through the Urdu-speaking South Asian Muslim diaspora, who have a substantial presence in the United Kingdom and other English-speaking countries. Like in any other language, YouTube must translate its user guidelines to Urdu. It could also help to provide information about Jews, the Holocaust, and anti-Semitism in countries where Jews are mostly absent. Most importantly, YouTube must be pressured to remove anti-Semitic content from its platform and to ensure that it does not reappear. Thank you.
Thanks very, very much, Navras. I will ask anyone who wants to relate specifically to what Navras had to say to ask their questions first, and then we'll move on to a discussion involving everybody. Tammy, are you speaking? Or clapping? Yes. Excellent. Hello, Tammy.
I think I clapped on accident, but yeah. Thank you very much, Navras, for that presentation. I'm currently taking a course by Manaz Aafreedi, different spelling than your last name, but I'm sure you know her. She actually mentioned you as a as a resource. She teaches on Muslims and the Holocaust. She's a Pakistani Muslim American. So one of the questions I had is that it's interesting because I think the perception from a lot of people is that the anti-Semitism as seen in Muslim communities is due to the Israel-Palestine issue. But interestingly, you know, the stuff that you're looking at didn't seem to have any references at all to Israel-Palestine. So do you find that the majority of it is not related to the conflict? Because that seems to be the perception.
No, I won't say so. In fact, the Arab-Israeli conflict has provided much incentive to Muslims across the world to Islamize the age-old classical European Judeophobia. There were scriptural polemics against Jews in Islam, but after the Arab-Israeli conflict, those scriptural polemics started being used more readily. And there has been an increased overly literal interpretation of those polemics. Interfaith scholars and activists are of the view that even when we come across any polemic in any scripture, we must try to look for some positive reference about the same people from the same text to juxtapose that polemic with that positive reference. But instead of doing this, there is a great stress and focus on the polemics, and the tendency is to interpret those polemics in an overly literal manner and deliberately refuse to read the metaphors in those polemics.
Thank you.
That's right.
Carrie.
Yeah, I'm curious. You gave us an example of a Muslim cleric actually borrowing from Christian fundamentalist theories of the end of days to promote anti-Semitism. And, you know, while I have to admit his ignorance, I'm really curious how that came to be. I mean, and are there any other examples of Muslim figures borrowing from Christian fundamentalism in that way?
Yes, well, when I say so, I actually borrow largely from Basim Tibi's research. It is he who brought this to our attention, that how the Arab Christians, specifically from Syria, were instrumental in importing features from European classical Judeophobia to the Arab world, which later came to be Islamized after the rise of Zionism, even before the State of Israel came into existence. But there were also some clerics from India who played a very important role in this, a role that largely goes unnoticed. In fact, the cleric who revived the concept of Jahiliya, the Jahiliya is a term that is used for the pre-Islamic age, and it literally means the age of ignorance. This concept was revived in order to describe our times, contemporary times, by an Islamist scholar, Maududi, who later moved to Pakistan. And his writings were later translated into Arabic. Those Arabic translations were read by Sayyid Qutb, who later popularized this concept of Jahiliya. And he also said that jihad was an obligation. It was incumbent on all Muslims to wage jihad against Jews and against Judeo-Christian West. And the Muslims were in a cosmic war with Jews, which also means that even if the Arab-Israeli conflict all of a sudden, surprisingly, gets resolved, yet that wouldn't necessarily bring about an end to Islamist anti-Semitism. We have to do something to stop people from focusing only on scriptural polemics and reading those polemics in an overly literal manner, and then bringing about a marriage of those polemics with the elements from classical Christian Judeophobia in Europe.
Thanks.
I'm not sure if I was able to answer your question.
I'll email you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time left, not very, very much, but I would be very happy for people to ask their questions or to engage briefly, and then we'll come back to what we have now really as a panel. I will go to Sabine, and I think we have a question in the chat also. Sabine. Sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to re-emphasize something we've said a few times, and I just went to Google to look up the revenue of these big social media companies for 2021, because it's really important that we keep that in mind. This is a business, right? Facebook making $117.9 billion in revenue in 2021, being the biggest one still. But others are obviously growing, and even YouTube with 28.8 billion in revenue. So when we're talking about this problem of hate and anti-Semitism being spread on social media, yes, we can talk about individuals having to learn how to behave properly, but I think we say in the book that, you know, we give a list of things that need to be done, but one thing is absolutely crucial, and that is that we get the social media companies to take ownership of this problem, and that's true whether, you know, it's about language guidelines or content management, whatever. I mean, they need to take responsibility. And, you know, if you Google how much Facebook spends to try to rein the problem in, yes, it may have been 5 billion as well in 2021 for security and so on, but how much of that actually gets to the issue is a big question. And even if that was all spent on this issue, it would be less than 5% of the revenue, right? So that, I think that everyone needs to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Sabine. There's a question in the chat, actually, which says that Jewish Voices for Peace are very active on social media, both online and offline. How would we challenge such well-organized groups and their messaging? And I would kind of add to that it's one thing asking social media companies to kind of prohibit or to ban particular kinds of anti-Semitic discourse. But of course, our experience is that the point about anti-Semitic discourse is that it's highly contested, and the very most dangerous kinds of anti-Semitic discourse and other racist kinds of discourse, one could argue, are specifically claimed to be not anti-Semitic and not racist. So the kind of best example really in Britain, of course, is Brexit. That some of us thought that there was quite a significant part of xenophobia within the whole Brexit debate and conspiracy fantasy. And of course, other people declared that that was an absolutely outrageous position, and how very dare we. And of course, that was the situation with anti-Semitism too, that we could see plenty of anti-Semitism around, but it was very clearly and angrily rejected by people in entirely mainstream politics and mainstream academia.
There is another great question about the audience on social media and their potential confrontation with anti-Semitic content. that's also a topic in the book, and you are right. Young people, you can find like really young people, like 7-year-old kids, being confronted with anti-Semitic content, mostly on TikTok, in very short videos, and they are exposed very often to really crass and violent content, or Gabi Weimann and Natalie Masri write about TikTok specifically in our book. Like this would be content, for instance, making fun of victims of the Holocaust in really very short videos, or saying horrific stuff to Jewish people. We have this. We had in Israel. We had this phenomenon that. Really people from all kinds of social milieus filmed themselves running towards the Hardim, like traditional or Orthodox people, and hitting them and trying to hit off their face covering and filming themselves while doing so, and it spread widely on TikTok, stuff like this. So this is what kids are exposed to. There's a lot of anti-Semitism in messengers that kids are nowadays using in schools. This is a huge problem. Teachers very often write to us and ask us how to deal with that. And again, we can only repeat it. We have so little research about those phenomena. Our book is really the first comprehensive book, and I can promise you it's just the starting point. Like, we hardly scratched the surface. There is so much more work to do. And lots of you know Günther Jikili and his team, and they're actually one of the few people who are really doing it already for like longer period, tracing those forms of anti-Semitism. So there's really lots of work to do. Instagram is super relevant for young people. But you find a lot of anti-Semitism also in you find them in all generation. It's a phenomenon of society, not a specific milieu, not a specific group, but every milieu has kind of their own social media. So this is very interesting. I would say people from 40 will be on Facebook and also on Twitter. People 40 to 30 will be on Twitter, Instagram, and so on and on, right? But for children, for definitely, and I'm really talking children, and this is really alarming because suddenly we also have a rise in suicides among children. Like, there were really upsetting cases of 7- and 9-year-old kids committing suicide because of hate on social media. I keep on saying this because for me it's unbelievable. When I was 7, I didn't have an idea about death, I believe. And we now have this phenomenon because they can only find content how to commit suicide on social media. So this is some of the things we are dealing with, and I see there are new questions. I'm going to read them. There was a question before for Sophie. Trying to find it.
Yeah, maybe I can just very briefly answer that before sort of going back to this very, important and but also like more broader issue. Actually, Monika and me, we're sort of like, trying to write a more theoretical article on the idea of tertiary anti-Semitism. Sorry, it was a question about whether by Andy, whether it's whether tertiary anti-Semitism would be generalizable also to other national contexts, and I would. So we'll continue to think about exactly that question. Actually, I would say yes. To a degree, if somebody from Australia would say, actually, it was really the Germans who suffered on from or after the Second World War, I would say that would be, also a form of tertiary anti-Semitism, but of course we identified it particularly in sort of the German context. So the idea of looking at the posts on the 8th of May was that is a day where in Germany it is, you know, part of German remembrance culture is to remember the victims of Nazi Germany, right? So the fact that the AfD does not do that, we sort of use as the contextual factor to say they don't do that, they don't do it on purpose, right? I mean, if they don't write anything about Holocaust victims on the 15th of September, no other party does that either, probably, except for, you know, there's maybe some event somebody is attending, some politician is attending, right? But the idea that the 8th of May would be a day where you would remember this, and the AfD is actively not doing that was one of the reasons, or one of the sort of the context out of which those messages became or can be considered as anti-Semitic. And that context, of course, is quite particular to Germany, but maybe we could find or identify similar sort of days in other countries as well, or other topics maybe.
I'm thinking we need to bring this to a close shortly. I wonder, Monika, if you'd like to respond to Judith's question in the chat, and if anyone else on the panel would like to respond pretty briefly. Oh, there's one more as well. Okay, that Holocaust survivors as well as anti-Semites have gone viral on TikTok. And Judith Ornstein says, you made some wise suggestions, for example, uplift of those being targeted, but also says that we need to report, but posters are anonymous and might be anywhere in the world. Even then, as Monika pointed out, for a variety of reasons, they escape censure. It's the Wild West out there, says Judith. As well as organizations, we need a well-aimed grassroots action to force the companies to police themselves. But where to begin?
Sorry, I didn't find
okay.
Where to begin? I already wrote a little bit about it in the chat. Demand accountability. Demand that your politicians demand accountability from the social media platforms. That's really, really important. We have laws against hate speech in Germany, which are now enforced. And this is really helpful. This has really helped because it sends a clear message to people who are affected. You will never manage to get all of the perpetrators, and for me, it's a hate crime just online, but it sends a clear message to the people affected that this is a crime, what's happening to them, and that this is persecuted. And I think this is really important. Demand accountability. Teach your children at home, teach your grandchildren, teach in your school, teach in your Beit Knesset, teach in whatever circles you are, teach social media literacy, explain about algorithms, explain that what you see on social media, and I'm sure most of us now are on some sort of social media, is not what you don't see what you choose. You see what algorithms show you. There's a whole lot out there that you will never see because algorithms prevent you from seeing it. Start reading about it. Read, for instance, Yaron Lanier. He built social media and he wrote a book about social media and its issues, which we can all understand. Educate yourself and your community about it. Take it very seriously because it's a threat. It's a horrific threat. The UN and Facebook's own investigation has shown that Facebook enabled genocide, like the hate speech, the unrestricted hate speech on Facebook enabled the genocidal violence against the Rohingya in Myanmar. So this is real. This is a real issue. Take it very seriously and talk to everybody you know about it who is on social media.
Thanks very, very much. Monika, does anyone else from the panel want to come back, or
No, I
well,
just want to thank everyone. It's been very nice to have such in-depth conversation with you all, and I hope we inspired some people to take this on and join the scholarship that's needed.
Oh, I think it's been a really great event. Thank you very, very much to everybody who's here, and to the speakers. And we should be able to, is your book available in a form that people can afford, or should people be ordering for their libraries?
We actually fought so people can afford it. It was super important to us that people can afford the book. It's also constantly you can find it cheaper on the web page. I actually don't know how much it is in what is it in UK right now? I forgot.
£27.
Thank you. So it is affordable, but nevertheless, ask your library to order it. Ask your university to order it. If you work in a research center, order it. Teach it to your students. Invite us for a guest lecture, so we can talk to your students.
Brilliant.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let me give you a link to the rest of the seminar series, which we are doing in collaboration with the Institute at Indiana. And let me also say that we have not charged any money for attending this seminar, and if people would like to give a donation to the London Centre for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism, then that would be very welcome indeed. Thank you very much to the speakers. Thank you for everybody who's here. Thank you.